Why are Black pastors praying for Eric Adams? I mean, he needs it, but but why? Also, the Voting Rights Act seemed to be on the chopping block. What does that mean for Black people? Well, today I have a special guest, so I'm excited to bring him in to answer those questions and to conclude with, of course, a book recommendation for the culture. Welcome back to another episode of The Church, the Court, and the Culture. My name is Brooke Gurley. Today I have a special guest who's joining me for this ride of The Church, the Court, and the Culture, and it is none other than my father, Pastor Jerry Gurley. I'm going to bring him in. Hello.
How you doing? How you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you for joining me for the Church, the Court, and the Culture. Before we get started, I always like to say, please, if you're not already subscribed to this page, whether it's on Substack or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can follow me on social media. I'm at Paluki's World everywhere, which is in the corner there. So you should be able to follow me. Yeah, there we go. Mm-hmm. Dad, what's your handles so people can follow you too?
Well, if you want to see the broader work that we do, you can go to the Freedom and Justice Institute. We're on TikTok, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram. Yes. That's the Freedom and Justice Institute.
And this picture of him in black and white. So in case you're like, is this, I don't remember. If you don't see him in black and white, then that's probably not him. All right. Now that we got those housekeeping matters to the side, let's get into the first thing, which we'll talk briefly, because mostly what we're going to talk about, of course, is the Voting Rights Act and what that means for Black people. So the first thing up is Eric Adams. And there's this picture of Black, and he posted it 3 days ago on his Instagram page with these Black pastors praying for him. And I was like, one, why are they praying? I mean, he does, like I said, we all need prayer, but he definitely needs prayer because he's got into some issues that, but for a pardon, but for whatever Trump got going on, he probably would still be indicted. But what came to mind and what I want to kind of throw out at you is, I'm like, is there no accountability within because we all know how during election season the politicians come in, they say their spiel, and then we don't hear from them again. It's the same thing when I'm seeing this photo. It's like, why are y'all there? Like, are y'all there to hold him accountable, to hold him up, or what is this? Is it enough just to pray for him? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much.
Well, we certainly could pray for all leaders, not just Black leaders, and not just leaders in high profile positions such as the mayor of New York City. So the fact that they are praying for him there's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? I mean, the Bible encourages us to pray for leaders, not just the ones that we like.
Right.
Well, that should be the starting point of our analysis. Now, what we say and what we think beyond that is our speculation, or what we suspect. And let me tell you what I suspect, that obviously is a photo op, well-orchestrated photo op to garner the support of the Black community. Because at this point, people in New York are looking at, particularly Black people, are looking at Eric Adams, and the question that they were asking even before the scandal, even before the indictment that has now been dropped, is, are you really for us? I mean, are you really there representing our interests? We help put you in this very powerful seat, but it doesn't seem like we're getting much benefit. Not that Black people were expecting favorable treatment, but what Black people were expecting was fair treatment, particularly as it relates to how they are treated by law enforcement. So there was always some concern about that, right? And then there were these rumors, there are allegations that actually manifested into an indictment.
He was indicted. Yeah, he was indicted. Yeah.
And of course, we read the language. If you care to, and you can still read the language of the indictment. There were some pretty damning facts. Particularly doing things for the Turkish government, I believe.
Yeah, it was the Turkish government. Yeah.
Putting pressure on the local code enforcement people to bend codes that were there for the safety of New Yorkers, so that they could build whatever they were trying to build. I think it may have been a hotel. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But the fact of the matter is, it seemed like he was getting these perks travel perks, flights and hotel accommodations. As some people often say, he was selling us out for fat.
Pork fat. I say it's for pork fat. Politicians love to sell us out for some pork fat. It's just like, what is this?
There's a suspicion, that was going on. Now let's get back to the picture, though. So we know that when people are in trouble politically, they try to circle the wagons. They call their allies. They call in favors. I hope that this isn't the case, but I'm just a little bit concerned that some of the people that were called to sit in or stand in that photo op were made promises of some sort. Now, I have no basis for saying it was or it wasn't, but I'm saying this is the kind of thing that happens politically. And so it's more, I'm concerned, and I don't know that this is the case, but I think that there's a basis for being somewhat concerned as to whether or not this is more about politics than about prayer.
Right. Right. And that's exactly it. And so then my concern is why are those within the Black church, or, of course it's not a monolith, but Black pastors, Black congregants, why are they allowing themselves to be used in this way without any real sense of accountability? But it could be, like you said, maybe we don't know, if they were promised something. So this is not about what's best for their congregation, but maybe what's best for them. And so they are willing to put themselves out there as this,
right. And their credibility,
right,
lending the credibility of their positions. Now, again, I'm not saying that we have any knowledge that any one specific minister in that photo was doing that, but we know historically those kinds of things have happened. So this is a concern that needs to be ferreted out by the people of New York.
Right.
Why were they there?
Well,
and another thought that comes to my mind, Miss Brooke, Professor Bluesky, whatever.
It's Bluesky on this platform.
Calling you in this setting. Is there a sense that we have to support Black leaders no matter what, even if we know or we have a strong suspicion that they have done something that is wrong? And if that's the impetus here, then I am deeply concerned, and I think we all should be deeply concerned, because being pro-Black does not mean that we support Black people in their mess, right?
Right.
Especially because really what they're doing is besmirching our reputation collectively as a community, right?
Right.
And they are drawing from our goodwill bank account, as it were.
Right.
And so we have to see that we don't have an obligation, I'll say this, to support corrupt leaders no matter who they are, what their race may be. And just because they're Black, that in and of itself doesn't mean that we've got to go the extra mile to support them when they are practicing behaviors that are not beneficial to our community.
Yeah, and I don't think Black people have a blanketed we support no more anyone Black. I mean, I don't see people supporting people, someone like Justice Clarence Thomas, for example, or Tim Scott. Like, we're not rallying behind them. But there is a question if somebody is politically aligned to a particular party, then they do get kind of the benefit of the doubt. I'm with you. I feel like, yeah, I'm with you. I feel like we can't, and I don't think we do. I don't think we do, but it would be problematic if it's just like, well, he's Black and we got to stand beside him. But I don't think that's what happened. I think the Black voters are far more sophisticated than people may give us credit for, because it's like I said, we're not supporting Tim Scott. Okay. Who's the person down there in Florida, the guy who thought he was going to get appointed something?
Byron Donaldson. Well, let's be clear about it. Byron Donaldson has a strong possibility of becoming the next governor of the state of Florida.
And we still won't support him. Okay.
Well, some Black people will, but most Black people in the state of Florida, and I am in the state of Florida, by the way, I am one of the Black people who will not be supporting Byron Donaldson. Right.
And that's all I'm saying is Black people are sophisticated. We don't just stick with race, because if that was true, that we would be supporting him. But these are good questions to raise, and I just want to throw that out with, like I said, on this segment is called The Church So this is the church part, but you all let me know what you think. Do you think that this is just about political props, using Black people as political props, or is like, no, let this man get some prayer. Everybody needs prayer. Drop a comment. Would love to know your thoughts. All right, now that we talked about the church, let's get into the court. And so this is really why you're here, Dad, to help me really unpack the court. So if you don't know, this past Wednesday, August 6th, was the 60th anniversary of the passing of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is a tremendous piece of legislation that really helped push for the ability of Black people to vote. And you may be thinking, but didn't we have the 15th Amendment? We did. But the way that the courts interpreted the 15th Amendment did not actually give Black people the right to vote. It said you cannot deny Black people the right to vote, or you cannot deny someone the right to vote based on their race. Now, the court didn't have to interpret it that way, but it did. And then you need something like the Voting Rights Act to ensure that. And so the Voting Rights Act comes along and it does great thing. It allows the federal government to actually monitor the states that are known to disenfranchise Black people. And then the biggest one is Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which allows other organizations like the Legal Defense Fund, the ACLU, to enforce the Voting Rights Act. And I talked to you all about 2 weeks ago or so how there's a stay with the case dealing with the Native Americans, which was a victory. But now, silently last Friday, the Supreme Court asked for a rebriefing of a case that it heard in March that's dealing with redistricting in majority minority districts. And it's a case out of Louisiana. So with that, Dad, I want to kind of throw it to you if you want to provide some more details and what's kind of concerning about that.
Thank you. And I'm speaking strictly as a pastor and as a civil rights activist and a student of Black history.
Right.
The one thing that we should know up front is that throughout the course of the civil rights movement, there are different pieces of legislation that came out, but the most significant, we'll say the signature piece of legislation that came out of the civil rights movement was the Voting Rights Act. It was loathed, it was challenged, it was opposed by Southern whites from the very beginning. And up until yesterday, it's been opposed by, in various different ways, more subtle ways today. But it has always been a thorn in the side of conservatives, because what it did is it brought Black people into the whole of society. Historically, the one indicia, or the one indicator that you are a full participant in a democracy is the right to the franchise, the right access to the ballot. And that's the one thing that after slavery came to an end, white Southerners continued to fight Black people so that they would not have. And so we went through a series of constitutional amendments, the 13th Amendment, which said we are free. And that wasn't enough. We went to the 14th Amendment, which says that we are citizens if we are born here, regardless of whether our parents or whether we were slaves at some point in time. And that wasn't enough. And we went to the 15th Amendment, which specifically dealt with this issue of denying Black people the right to vote. And that wasn't enough. So ultimately, we get to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And actually, Paliki, I would tell you that it had two important sections. You talked about Section 2.
Right, which is the enforcement, which allows these private institutions or organizations to vote. And so tell us the other one, which was shut down already, knocked down by the court.
Section 5.
Section 5, yeah.
It was the pre-clearance section, which was the most, the white Southerners and the white political establishment and the Republican Party, and I'm just calling it out for who actually fought this and brought up test cases before the Supreme Court. So ultimately, there was a case involving
Shelby County. I think it's Shelby County.
Shelby County versus Eric Holder, I believe, but it was challenging the voting rights pre-clearance Section 5, and essentially what the Southern jurisdictions were saying was that was back then. We know how to behave ourselves. Prejudice is something in the past. Racism doesn't really exist in the same way that it existed back then. We're better now. We're cured. We don't need the medication, using that metaphor, Section 5, because under Section 5, before a state or a local jurisdiction could change their laws that relate to voting, they had to pre-clear it with the Justice Department.
So there's this conflation that the medicine, the cure, is somehow the disease that gets warped, and even with the case in the Louisiana,
and the relief from the structural prejudice is somehow itself an evil, an inherent evil. When of course they knew. When I say they, I mean I believe, and this is of course my view, my based upon my study of history. It was an argument that was always made by conservatives and white Southerners that to be forced to treat African Americans as equals with all other Americans was somehow an undue burden upon them. That was the approach. So essentially, though, the Supreme Court knocked out the pre-clearance, and lo and behold, after that, the different states, particularly in the southern region of the United States, began to enact laws that made it cumbersome, burdensome. Though some of these laws were neutral on their face, they had a disparate impact. They disproportionately affected African Americans' ability to access voting. Such things as, Black people were known to have souls to the polls on Sundays, extended early voting. Some of these southern states limited the amount of time that early voting was available, began to put restrictions on absentee ballots, began to put limits. I believe Georgia fairly recently passed a law that said you can't hand water to people who are standing in line.
Which is like, what's the benefit of that? That's all about making it more difficult to vote and discouraging people.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. So what we're seeing here is that there's been a slow roll to the cemetery for the Voting Rights Act. And I just want to make sure that we all put this law in the proper historical perspective. As I said, it is the signature piece of legislation that came out of the civil rights movement. But also on another level, I want you to consider that there were three civil rights advocates who lost their lives in Mississippi, who were found buried in an earthen dam, if you know about that. There were 4 beautiful Black girls who were blown up, literally had their heads blown off in Sunday school in Birmingham, which they fondly refer to as Bombingham. Right. There is blood, sweat, and tears invested in the Voting Rights Act. And we simply cannot allow it to die in the middle of the night while we are busy entertaining ourselves or whatever it is that we're doing. We need to, out of reverence to all those who invested their very lives in the Voting Rights Act, we need to make some noise. We need to shine some light on this situation.
And what does that look like then? So what do we do as Black people in America? We can see the trend. We know the history. When, like I said before, this idea that the cure somehow becomes the problem, even back to Andrew Johnson, who was talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and 65 and saying how, ooh, this is more rights than even white people have. And it's just like this notion. So what do we do? Because otherwise I see a cycle happening where we're going back to Jim Crow, where we're going back to now we're going to go to literacy tests, like you were saying, like literacy tests, guess the number. They won't do that. They're not going to, well, I shouldn't say they won't be that bold because they've been doing some pretty bold things.
Right now down in Texas, they're literally trying to redraw the congressional districts. See, that would have not gone under Section 5 because they would have had to run that through pre-clearance and it would have been shut down if the Justice Department was functioning like it typically does. Right. So, and I'm not even going to go there. But to your question, and it's a very good question. I think there's not one single thing that we have to do. We have to look at the opponent and look at areas of the opponent's vulnerability. Right now, they've got the Senate, they've got the House, and they've got the executive branch locked down. And they have at least a neutral to favorable response by the courts at this point, though I think it's a 50-50, or as we say in Cali, 50-50. But so we have to mount challenges in all of those spheres. We have to propose legislation that reverses the harm that has been done through interpretations, we think wrong interpretations, but that's just my view, my idea. We have to propose legislation. We need to have our Congress people out there proposing bills. Whether they pass is one thing. We need to be having a conversation in our legislative bodies. And keep in mind, the federal law sets the floor in terms of behavior and rights. At the state level, states can always give citizens more protection. They can't take away the basic protection. So we put a lot of focus, and I think rightfully so, at the national level, but we cannot neglect the state houses, because having those conversations, on a local basis. So then that's one thing on the legislative branch. We need to file some amicus briefs when this is being heard on the way up to, not, again, just so that we are on the record in terms of not being silent. I think our silence is a statement if we don't make it known. So we need to speak to the court. We actually need to intelligently and respectfully and collectively speak to the court through different mechanisms that the law provides for. That's one thing. And then apart from the secular aspect of this, we can talk all day about the fact that the history of the white evangelical church and Southern Baptist Church and many other Southern religious bodies was antithetical to everything that represented Black progress. We can go to our white brothers right now and say, look, this is your chance to redeem yourself. Because let's face it, the executive branch and the legislative branch and even the judicial branch is not immune to public opinion.
Right.
And so if there is a hue and cry from all corners of society that says this area of law is sacred in many respects, right? And essential to our democracy, to the preservation of our democracy, then things may not go the way that they're planning them to go. I'll say this, this is the last thought I have. I used to sell Kirby vacuum cleaners back in 1980.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, what is a Kirby vacuum? Like, just, I know you get the point.
Kirby vacuum cleaner is a very, very expensive vacuum cleaner, and overpriced. Back then, the Kirby vacuum cleaner in 1982, they sold for like $2,500.
$2,500
for a
Kirby vacuum cleaner?
Yes, back then. So they were the Cadillac, BMWs, whatever they
I just need to pick up dirt for me. But go ahead. You were making a point about Kirby. You used to sell Kirby vacuum cleaners.
And I remember asking my sales manager, how do you convince a person to buy a $2,500 vacuum cleaner?
Right.
And without blinking an eye or batting an eyelash, the sales manager looked at me and he said, ask them to. The answer to every unasked question is no. So one of the things that we've got to do is step up our ask, or even, I would say it another way, our demand.
Get your ass together.
Yeah, so that's
what you sound like you were saying. I was like, wait. Get your ass.
Well, yeah, get your ass together. Yes. Right now you're being childish and I'm being
That's what I thought you were saying. I was like,
this is not how I raised you.
It is.
But I'll remember to keep you in my prayers tonight.
It is though, but I was raised this way. Go ahead.
So the point is, make them give us 1,000 no's on the world stage.
Mm-hmm.
We have the moral high ground. Let us occupy it strategically by demanding, by making demands on the part of our white evangelical brothers and sisters and other Southern white leaders who have an atrocious history.
Atrocious.
Biblically, they cannot justify what they've done and what they are doing to Black people. Biblically, it just come off that field trip of abortion. And I know I'm stepping on some toes right now. And let's talk about the things that Jesus talked about, which is justice and oppression. Because this, if they take this away, then it just reinstitutes a new form or an old form, actually, of oppression, which is to deny us the access to the ballot. So to deny us a voice in this democracy.
Absolutely. No, you're right. We need to make some demands, make some asks, and then employ all, like you said, all branches, because no one's immune from this political pressure. And
that's how democracy works, right? I mean,
right, allegedly,
all branches of government are answerable to the people and act on the behalf of the people.
Which is why they try to intentionally shut us out of the franchise, because we no longer have a voice, and they're no longer accountable to us if they shut us out.
Right.
So, but I feel like there's some more theological points, but we'll save that for the Pastor and the Professor podcast. Y'all stick around. That's a whole different podcast. You want to listen to that as well. Any concluding thoughts on that? Because I know we talked about a lot on the court as far as what's going on with the Voting Rights Act. Anything else?
Yeah, I think we have to, again, through the formal process, if you're not parties, we have to file those amicus briefs, sometimes referred to as amicus briefs. It depends on what law school you went to, I guess. But the point is, that's the formal mechanism to put our positions, our concerns on the record. But informally, the court is listening. The court does not exist in a political societal vacuum. It is aware and it is affected by the concerns of the people, and rightfully so in a democracy, right? So I think we have to let the court know early and often that this is a critical point in time, not just for Black people, but for our very democracy. Because one way that you judge the health of a democracy is not by how the powerful are treated or the favored, but the disfavored,
right.
The disfranchised, disenfranchised, the marginalized. What kind of justice, what kind of conclusions and outcomes are they regularly able to get from the government, which is comprised of the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch? So I think that we have to be citizens. In other words, as I understand this democracy, as I've been taught these many years, we have to fully engage as citizens of this democracy.
Absolutely. I agree. We have to be fully engaged, because it is a very crucial time in this country. It's very crucial what's going on beyond just what's happening in the courts, but definitely what's happening in the executive branch. We cannot be complacent. We must stand up and make some demands. But I would love to know your thoughts. What do you think we should be doing as far as the Voting Rights Act? Or maybe you're like, no, we don't need that anymore. Or maybe you're like, this is not for the evangelicals. Or you agree that it is very much something that they need to pick up. It is an obligation that they have. Whatever it is, drop me a note. I would love to know. And of course, and we also have to pray. Oh, definitely have to pray. But let me know your thoughts. Hit me up in the comments. All right, now that we have gone over the court, the church, not in that order, now it's time for the culture, one of my favorite parts of this show. And this week, I'm getting back to what I've kind of been trying to do, which is make recommendations. And this week, I have a book recommendation that I have it here. It's called The Life of Herod the Great. I have it in the hard copy, right? But I've been listening to it on Audible, which is by Blair Underwood. He's narrating. He's fabulous. I highly recommend the Audible book because he brings it to life. But what's so interesting about this, and why I included it on the podcast, is because Herod is actually a very central figure in Christianity, right? He's the one who Jesus called the fox. Tell that fox, I'm finna go out here and lay hands. But you didn't remember that scripture. It's there in Luke. But he's also, again, a central figure in the story. And so this is kind of Zora Neale Hurston. It was an unfinished manuscript that they kind of worked up, and they released it earlier this year. Parts of it, I think, got burned in the fire, but it's just her story, her reimagining of his life and taking it. And she did a lot of research apparently for it. I recommend that. Like I said, I've been listening to it on Audible because it's been great. But anyway, that's me. Dad, have you been doing any kind of book recommendation? Do you have any recommendation? What have you been reading, listening to?
I'm always reading, but my reading is not that much fiction. I'm really a fact reader. And I've been reading a book for a couple of years, reading it on and off, written by an African author who is a nuclear physicist. He's a linguistic expert, and he's an Egyptologist. His name is Sheikh Anta Diop. That's Sheikh Anta Diop. He writes about the African origin of civilization. It's a very wonderful book, and I think it would empower you and empowers me and energizes me as a Black person, because it talks about how many of the inventions and many of the complexities of civilization that is assigned to the Greeks, actually, the Greeks will tell you, the ancient Greeks, such as Herodotus, such as Socrates, and even Pythagoras, they all admitted that they got that knowledge from Africa. So it's an interesting read. I think what happens is, as a Black person, if you read this, it energizes you, it gives you a sense of pride, and more importantly, it causes you to realize that there's greatness that's deposited inside of you. So I highly recommend that book.
Awesome. I actually have my own copy too. It's on my list. I have a big list. I just weave in and out of books. You know what I mean? Like, I just need to focus, but that is a good one. So thank you for the recommendation. And thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of The Church, the Court, and the Culture. Y'all, this is my dad, Pastor Jerry Gurley. Remind them again where they can find you on social media, because I recommend that you follow him.
Yeah, on social media, we have the Freedom and Justice Institute. You can find that on YouTube by that title, on Instagram by that title, and of course on TikTok, or as I like to say, TikTok.
TikTok, on the TikTok, exactly. And you can join or follow me on social media. I'm on Bluesky, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, in YouTube, and it's Paluki's World, but I think on the TikTok, I'm Paluki. I say that every week, like I should just go back and check, and I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Also, please be sure to subscribe to this podcast. You can subscribe on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, please leave me a note. I would love to know your thoughts, your comments, and maybe we'll get together, and if you put a comment, we'll respond to that as well. Until next time, you all be blessed. Peace.